War doesn't start with explosions. It starts with math, coordinates, fuel loads, radar ranges, flight times measured down to the second. And on February 28, 2026, that math converged over Iran in what Israeli officials called Operation Roar the Lion, and what the United States referred to as Operation Epic Fury. This wasn't a warning shot. It wasn't symbolic. According to early reports, the ultimate target wasn't just infrastructure, it was the supreme leader himself. That changes the stakes, because when you aim at the head of a regime, you're not trying to send a message, you're trying to end something. The first wave hit Tehran's most sensitive government districts, areas surrounding the nerve center of political power. Simultaneously, explosions tore through major military and industrial hubs across the country. Kermanshah in the west, Isfahan, the crown jewel of Iran's nuclear and drone programs. In heavily fortified ideological centers like Qom, the strikes were synchronized to the second. This is where the operation becomes less about firepower and more about choreography. Military planners used a tactic called time on target, a doctrine designed to overwhelm a system before it has time to think. Cruise missiles launched from destroyers, payloads dropped from stealth bombers, Israeli fighter jets crossing hostile airspace, each weapon fired from a different location at a different time, yet all arriving at the exact same moment. The goal wasn't just destruction, it was systemic shock. Imagine sitting in an air defense bunker. Radar screens flicker, alerts spike. Then every high-value site across your country explodes at once. There's no sequence, no escalation ladder, just instant collapse. That's the theory. To execute it, the U.S. didn't rely on nearby bases alone. 2 floating airfields were positioned like chess pieces, the USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Group in the Arabian Sea and the USS Gerald R. Ford in the eastern Mediterranean. From those platforms, aircraft, missiles, and electronic warfare systems created a multi-directional assault envelope. Meanwhile, Israeli jets had to travel between 930 and 1,240 miles each way to reach central Iran. That means threading through or around Syrian and Iraqi airspace, coordinating mid-air refueling, timing entry windows down to minutes, one delay, and the synchronization collapses. But the real advantage wasn't distance, it was invisibility. Iran's air defenses, including its domestically produced systems and Russian-supplied batteries, never fully activated in time. And that wasn't luck. It was electronic warfare on a scale most people don't see. Before the bombs fell, the battlefield had already been rewritten. Using cyber operations and space-based coordination, false data was injected into Iranian radar networks. Screens filled with phantom aircraft. Confusion spread through command channels. And then came the decoys, miniature air-launched drones designed to mimic entire squadrons of fighter jets. To a radar operator staring at chaos, the sky looked full. But the real threat was somewhere else. 5th-generation stealth fighters, American and Israeli F-35s, potentially supported by F-22s, slipped through fractured corridors undetected. Behind them, Tomahawk cruise missiles skimmed low over terrain in nap-of-the-earth flight, striking S-300 and S-400 radar installations and command bunkers. The door wasn't kicked down, it was quietly unlocked. And once it opened, the heavy hitters moved in. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers penetrated deep airspace to target hardened nuclear facilities. F-15 E-Strike Eagles, capable of carrying up to 19 JDAMs or 28 smaller precision weapons, hunted mobile ballistic missile launchers and secondary command nodes. Carrier-based FA-18S launched anti-radiation missiles specifically designed to home in on any radar foolish enough to power on. Within hours, the integrated air defense system wasn't just suppressed, it was fragmented. By sunrise, key radar sites were destroyed, missile units crippled, and major nuclear infrastructure struck. On paper, it looked like a textbook preemptive strike. But here's where reality intrudes. Iran didn't collapse. Instead, it responded. Under what it called Operation Truthful Promise 4, Tehran launched waves of ballistic missiles and drones targeting U.S. bases and allied positions across the region. The Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE was hit. The U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain was targeted. Air defenses in Qatar intercepted incoming missiles. Kuwait locked down its airspace. Sirens echoed across Israeli cities as interceptors lit up the night sky. This is the part most people underestimate. A preemptive strike doesn't eliminate retaliation, it accelerates it. Iran possesses thousands of ballistic missiles and drones. You can blind radar systems temporarily. You can destroy launch sites, but you can't erase inventory overnight. And if reports about the Supreme Leader's death are accurate, a claim still disputed in early hours, The conflict shifts from deterrence to revenge. That's not a tactical question. It's a psychological one, because now the calculus changes from can we win to how much pain are we willing to absorb. Preemption works best when it ends something quickly, when shock paralyzes response, when the first blow is also the final blow. But what happens when it isn't? What happens when the system absorbs the hit and decides escalation is survival? The first night was about precision. The second phase is about endurance. And endurance is where wars stop looking cinematic. The opening strike was engineered for paralysis. Blind the radar, fracture command, decapitate leadership, cripple launch sites. But once the initial shock fades, conflict becomes a test of production capacity, missile inventories, logistics chains, and political will. Iran's counterattack made one thing clear. Enough of its arsenal survived to matter. Ballistic missiles don't require air superiority. They don't need stealth corridors, they just need fuel, coordinates, and a launch window. Even with degraded radar systems and damaged command nodes, mobile launchers hidden in valleys or underground facilities can disperse, fire, relocate, and repeat. That's why the second wave of the U.S.-Israeli strategy focused heavily on ballistic missile destruction. But destroying mobile launchers is a statistical game. You hunt them with F-15Es scanning terrain with advanced radars. You deploy carrier aircraft armed with anti-radiation missiles to suppress any surviving air defense emitters. You rely on airborne command platforms to manage hundreds of aircraft simultaneously. You refuel midair, turn around, and sortie again. But every missile launcher you miss becomes tomorrow's headline. And this is where the broader architecture of the operation starts to reveal itself. The three-wave structure wasn't random. Wave 1, blind and silence. Air defense sites, radar installations, command headquarters. Wave 2, cut the claws, ballistic missile systems. Wave 3, degrade the future, military manufacturing industries. That last objective is the quiet one, because wars are not just fought with what exists today. They're fought with what can be rebuilt tomorrow. Isfahan wasn't just symbolic. It represents production, drones, advanced systems, nuclear-linked infrastructure. Crippling it is less about immediate survival and more about long-term deterrence. But deterrence assumes rational recalculation. And that's the uncomfortable variable. If the supreme leader was indeed killed, as some reports claim, the internal dynamics inside Iran shift dramatically. Power vacuums in authoritarian systems rarely produce calm transitions. They produce consolidation struggles. Revolutionary Guard factions recalculating influence, hardliners demanding visible retaliation to prove continuity. In that environment, restraint looks like weakness, which means escalation can become politically necessary. Now zoom out. The United States positioned 2 carrier strike groups for this operation. Carrier warfare isn't just about launch capacity, it's about signaling. A carrier group represents sovereign territory that floats. It extends air power without relying on foreign governments who may hesitate once missiles start landing on their soil. But here's the catch. Regional bases were still hit. Al Dhafra, Bahrain. Interceptions over Qatar and Israel. That means allies are now participants whether they wanted to be or not. And that widens the circle. Because once regional airspace locks down, oil markets react. Insurance rates spike. Commercial shipping adjusts routes. Energy futures price in risk premiums. Even countries not firing a single missile feel the aftershock. Preemptive strikes are designed to control escalation, but they also compress decision timelines. When everything detonates at the same second, thanks to time-on-target synchronization, you eliminate the slow buildup that usually allows diplomacy to intervene. There's no gradual warning ladder, no incremental sanctions, just impact. From a purely operational standpoint, it's impressive. Electronic warfare injecting false radar data, decoys simulating full squadrons, stealth corridors carved open by tomahawks flying nap-of-the-earth profiles, B-2 bombers targeting hardened sites, carrier aircraft sustaining pressure deep into hostile airspace. It's a display of technological asymmetry, but asymmetry doesn't equal immunity. Missile defense systems like Iron Dome and regional intercept networks can blunt incoming waves. They cannot guarantee zero impact, and even a small percentage of successful strikes can reshape public opinion overnight. That's the second layer of this conflict, narrative. Israel framed the strike as preemptive necessity. The United States presented it as coordinated defense. Iran framed its retaliation as legitimate resistance. Each side is speaking to a different audience. Domestic populations, regional partners, global powers watching quietly, Russia, China, European states, recalculating leverage and alignment. Because every major strike resets credibility. If the operation successfully dismantles Iran's air defenses long-term, It signals a decisive shift in regional power balance. If Iran demonstrates sustained retaliatory capacity despite the first blow, it signals resilience and potentially deterrence through endurance. There's also a strategic paradox here. By demonstrating the ability to blind and penetrate advanced air defenses so comprehensively, the U.S. and Israel have showcased capabilities that other adversaries are now studying in detail. Every radar deception technique revealed, every coordination timeline exposed, becomes a data point for future countermeasures. Power displayed is power understood, and once understood, it can be adapted against. Which brings us back to the opening premise. War begins with math. The math of synchronized impacts, the math of flight ranges stretching over 1,000 miles, the math of how many missiles remain in underground stockpiles, the math of interceptor inventories versus incoming volleys. But beneath the math sits something harder to quantify. Political survival, national pride, perception of strength. If preemption succeeds completely, it ends a threat before it matures. If it only partially succeeds, it can harden the threat into something more determined. Right now, the region sits in that ambiguity. Air defenses have been blinded before, temporarily. Missile forces have been severed, partially. Industrial capacity has been struck, but not erased. The question isn't whether the first night was devastating. It was. The question is whether devastation translates into deterrence or into escalation that unfolds over months instead of hours. Because when you attempt to remove the head of a regime, you don't just risk retaliation, you risk transformation. And transformation is unpredictable. So here we are, 2 carrier groups positioned, regional bases on alert, missile inventories recalculated, political speeches drafted, markets watching, citizens waiting for sirens. The first strike was synchronized down to the second. The next move won't be governed by timing alone. It will be governed by how each side interprets what just happened and how much uncertainty they're willing to tolerate before choosing to strike again. The uncomfortable truth is this: preemptive wars are designed to control the future. But once they begin, the future stops being predictable. And the real question now isn't how the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran. It's whether that first calculation made the region safer, or simply started a countdown no one can fully see.